Hello, Beyond the Code listeners, and thank you for joining me for another episode. Today, I'm joined by Jason Schwartz, tax partner and co-head of the digital assets group at Fried Frank. Jason is an excellent lawyer and a stand-up guy, and anybody who's building in the blockchain space can attest to how much money these guys could save you. Tax and regulation go hand in hand, and it's absolutely imperative to get sound tax advice if you're building in this space. I really enjoyed this episode with Jason, and I think you will too. And now, to Jason. Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzy Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. Jason, thank you for joining me today. It's been hard to pin you down, and I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Tax holds a very dear place in my heart, partially because I pay so much of it, but also when we both of us work in the crypto sector where regulation is kind of like wishy-washy, and where the potential to make lots of money and have to pay lots of money to the tax man is very high, and often clients come to us for, initially we would start out with helping them put together a structure that makes sense. We always say from a regulatory and a tax perspective, and then I put a little asterisk at the end and say, I'm not a tax expert, but we work closely with tax experts in determining what's the best outcome from a tax perspective. So I couldn't do anything without you and people like you, and it's quite amazing how integral your services are to save money for lots and lots and lots of people. And while you guys don't work pro bono, I always tell people that you're better to lay out the money now because you could save a whole lot of money later. So kudos to you for existing and doing the valuable work that you do.
Thank you. Quite
being
an advertisement.
being a non-expert in what is increasingly a complex subsector within basically everything that you do in the crypto world, the business world generally. And I guess I'm going to come to that later when I ask you what exactly it is that you do. Heads up. What is it? What is it that you do? And I'll explain what I mean. Like what? Obviously, I'd love to know like a little bit more about your background and your career, but then also like what? I mean, you're the co-head of digital assets at Fried Frank, and so presumably you spend a lot of your time working with digital asset related projects. I'd love to know what that looks like currently. And also, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. I also want to talk a little bit about, some DAO structures and the industry and the tech generally and how it might be impacted from a tax perspective. But I'd love to know a little bit more about like what you do, what your day-to-day looks like. Let's just kick it off from there.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for that intro. I do quite a bit of pro bono work, but probably not for most of
not for
your
crypto
listeners.
entrepreneurs who are looking to make billions.
So I head up a not-for-profit incubator that we call the 501 Foundry. I'll talk about all the good things I do before getting into the
okay.
The 501 Foundry takes fledgling charitable organizations, whether involved in crypto or not, and we incorporate them. So we enable, we get people in corporation, typically, as a Delaware C corporation, and then help them navigate the application for tax exemption under Section 501c, typically Section 501c3.
Hmm.
So we have worked with digital assets adjacent organizations, and even very sort of in the weeds crypto groups that have at their heart a charitable mission. In order to be a tax exempt organization in the United States, you need to be run not. So some people think like, anything non-profit can qualify. There's often a misconception in our space that that can include, for example, a like a protocol steward, but that's actually not the case. It needs to be charitable. So typically, you're talking about an organization that's set up primarily for public education or for or to promote scientific or technological research. But that does encompass a number of organizations within our space, right? So there are, for example, organizations set up to educate the public about decentralized finance or about the importance and value of self-custody, about crypto values in general. There are organizations that are set up to sort of help herd cats, so to speak, within the technological community, to help promote research about betting markets, et cetera. Those organizations, assuming
Those are
that
your like
those are your
those
sort
would
of
be who the 501(c)(3) Foundry would cater
yeah.
to primarily.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And so, and oftentimes, we've actually worked with organizations that are kind of like DAO adjacent entities. You might have you might have at least a group of people who call themselves a DAO. I think DAO is kind of not always,
We'll get there. We'll get there.
it's often a misnomer. But yeah, but you might have a group of sort of a token-based voting group that decides or realizes that it needs a legal entity in order to accomplish its mission. And the goal is not necessarily to turn a profit, right? It's to send women and minorities to crypto conferences so that they can participate in hackathons or something, or it's to
Presumably that
do
furthers
something else.
education as well.
Exactly. And so we've helped organizations like that set up 501c3s where the DAO can kind of, consult with or advise the 501c3, and then the 501c3 kind of is the entity that actually takes in donations, makes grants, et cetera. So that's something I
Okay.
do pro bono. But you asked a sort of more, a more targeted question about
No,
what I do.
and
I
that's your side project, or that's the firm's side project, or that's something that you do
both.
together with the
Yeah.
firm. Like,
I,
how did that spin out?
I moved to Fried Frank, which is my current firm. I'm a tax partner in
Go
the.
back. I like to start from the
Yeah, yeah,
beginning.
yeah, yeah.
Who are
Okay,
you?
I'm a tax partner
No,
at
that's not who you are.
Fried Frank. I'm Jason
Okay.
Schwartz. I'm a tax partner at Fried Frank, which is
Hmm.
a multinational law firm based in Wall Street, but with offices in a number of different cities, of which DC is one. I practice out of the DC office. Usually out of the DC office, as you can see, I'm in my I'm in my home office right now. I'm about to fly to New Orleans for a non-crypto conference. I do a number of non-crypto sort of TradFi things as well, and I co-head our digital assets practice. Um, so when I moved to Fried Frank from another Wall
So,
Street
but
base.
I'll go back. Like, where'd you grow up? How did you get into crypto? How did you get into law? How did you get to Fried Frank? Like,
My origin story.
I like that. I like to like deep dive a little bit.
I grew up in New Jersey.
Okay, whereabouts?
I
I also grew up in New Jersey,
Oh, in Wayne.
in Wayne. Okay,
Are
I
are
grew up
you
in
familiar?
Teaneck. Yeah, I'm
Oh, okay,
familiar.
cool. A lot of my friends were grew up in Teaneck. Yeah. So yeah, Northeast Jersey.
Hmm.
Fairly close to Manhattan, right? Um, uh, was not techie at all, other than that I was primarily an indoor kid and like playing Nintendo. Um, I was actually very much a musician.
Really?
Like so many people who grew up in New Jersey, I was in bands from, in that era at least. I was in bands from like seventh grade on. I played electric bass in a punk band, and then
Love it.
I played bass in like a metal band. Uh, all through college, really. I also am classically trained, so I play the clarinet and the piano as well. Um, so, but I went to law school because what else
Hmm.
do you do with an English major and a music kind of focus? Um, so I went to law school. I somehow fell into tax law. That's like a whole nother story.
What does that mean?
But
How
but it
did you
was.
fall into tax law?
You really want the story?
Of course I want the story. Otherwise I wouldn't be asking.
Um, the way large law firms work is you do moderately well your first year of law school, and you get invited to be a summer associate, which is like a clerk at a large law firm. So I accepted an offer at my first law firm, the firm I was at before Freed Frank. Um,
Is
and
it is it like not PC to say the name of the firm?
it's typically not, but it was called
Okay.
Cadwalader. It doesn't matter. It was called
Gosh,
Cadwalader.
I'll edit
I'm
that
not
part out.
hiding the ball or anything. No. It's fine. It's also difficult to pronounce, so it's kind of whatever. And all law firms are honestly kind of the same. But uh, back then, they would the HR department or whoever was in charge of kind of babysitting us during that summer would occasionally send email blasts, like first to respond gets tickets to a Knicks game or
Oh
whatever.
wow.
So
Like in the
and I kept
movies.
yeah the movies, and I kept losing, so I told myself, okay, next time I'm just going to respond like without even reading the email. So they sent an email blast, and I responded, and it turned out that the blast was to like
Who wants to
basically
be a tax
be
lawyer?
it was basically to like be the date of like a senior, then senior, now retired tax partner whose wife couldn't make it with him to see the New York Philharmonic. Um, so he and I had a very lovely dinner,
An
very
ex-musician and
romantic.
a
Yeah, well, it
aspiring.
worked out. Yeah, it worked out, right? Like we had a nice dinner. We went to the Philharmonic. It was I think it was to see some pianist play like Rachmaninoff's Second or something, which was really fun. I still remember it. It was many years ago. He and I chatted. We talked about classical music. We talked about how unfortunate it is that our current financial system basically
Sucks.
siphons all like talent and intelligence to do its bidding in banking and finance. And after that, we were actually in the midst of the world blowing up, right? It was summer of 2008. Bear Stearns was going under. It was one of the firm's biggest clients. There was really no work to
You
do.
don't look
We
that
were
old, but I'll give it to you. Fine.
we were all just kind of doing like fake make work projects that the partners were coming up with, right? So after that, he gave me a few fake projects for tax and said, hey, if you're interested in joining tax. Tax is weird. It's sort of like you get, it's one of the few groups that you get like a special invitation to, um,
Hmm.
at least at the time.
Like in Israel, you wouldn't become a tax lawyer if you didn't either have a degree in accounting or an LLM in tax.
Okay. Yeah. There's some firms that require an LLM. This one didn't. And they invited me, and because I was so terrified of like not getting an offer, because the world was blowing up, I was like, yes, like
Give it to
sure, of
me.
course. Yeah. So I agreed, and that's it. I was in tax. It's kind of funny.
Wow,
Uh, yeah. So I've made the best out of a bad situation, I guess.
that's a great story.
Um, no, I ended up liking tax. I think again, I really think um, most big law firms are very, very similar. And frankly, like from the perspective of a law student entering a big law firm, most practice groups are very similar as well, right? Like you're just there to, work from, whatever, all hours of the day,
From
right? Like
forever to forever, yeah.
yeah, I got there every morning at 8 a.m. I didn't leave until 2 a.m., many nights once I started, and I would have been doing the same, with only a slight variation in any other group. So like I worked my ass off for a number of years and ended up at least doing well enough to make
Big
partner.
partner.
Yeah,
Mazel
yeah.
tov.
It's been a while. It's been a while since that occasion as well. But yeah, I made partner at my first firm, and then after working there for a number of years,
That
primarily
which
in
shall not be
TradFi,
named.
uh, decided that it was time to move on. So,
Okay.
which I guess brings me to the crypto origin story, kind of.
So
As
you
I
moved to
was,
free frank pre-crypto?
yeah. No, but
I'm
at
saying like pre your individual crypto story.
Yeah, basically. So at Cadwalader, oh, I let it slip again.
Shh.
I focus primarily on financial products and securitizations, specifically collateralized loan obligations, and which
Okay.
is a super esoteric corner of the securitization space. I literally wrote the book on the taxation of CLOs. There's a series of Bloomberg tax management portfolios.
All
Uh,
co-authored by you.
oh no, there's like several hundred, right? One in each
Okay.
subject, and tax lawyers use them as like mini Bibles to get up to speed on different areas of tax law. I wrote the one on CLOs, and after practicing in the world of CLOs for several years and feeling like okay, I guess I could do this for the next 30 years of my career, but I'd shoot myself in the face. Maybe I should try something else. I was given the opportunity to move over to Fried Frank with a group of people that included my partner in financial products at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh, here, this is cool. I'll get into financial products. I was starting to get some work in crypto. Like um, I had done some sort of plain vanilla fund structuring for crypto. At the time it was like 2021 or so. What was going
And
on
like,
in
how are you approaching it? Where like was it for you like oh just like another task, or was it like oh this could be really
it was
interesting? Like I want
well
to
it
learn more
start
about this like outside of tax work.
yeah it started uh, basically as a hate project as a revenge project. The funds partner whom I worked with had first gone to a more senior tax partner at the firm to ask him to help her structure some plain vanilla like Bitcoin fund, like just like a
Okay.
standard, like maybe it traded like Bitcoin and Ether, but that was it. And she came to me, um, you know, uh, really, with her tail between her legs. Jason, I should have gone to you. You're younger. You're easier. You're easier with clients. Like you're willing to dig into this technology. This fund is just getting like totally, messed up. Like, can you help me? Can you help me fix it? Right. Um, so
At which point you had like prior knowledge of crypto,
no, no,
or
not at
oh,
all.
okay,
Not at all.
but just because you were
It was
the young
probably,
guy.
yeah, it was at the time it was probably like 2020,
Okay.
I'm like guessing. And so but I was like, yeah, I could do this. It was really because I wanted to just prove that like she should have come to me first, which truth is like this other guy's super like brilliant guy, right? Like, I shouldn't even try to compare myself with these like more senior partners. But I was feisty and a young partner who wanted to prove myself. So I dug in and very rapidly crypto pilled myself. Started listening to bank lists as one does, I guess. Started, like reading all the white papers. Come 2021, it was a super exciting time, as you remember, in crypto, right? And then I just got really into it. I discovered, a little too late, but I discovered generative art. It was sort of like, now in retrospect, kind of on the other side of the bubble, right? As everything was just
But
going
you didn't
down.
come at it from a bubbly perspective. I mean, like
No, I'm
you're
not right. I wasn't like a trade. I just, I was super excited by what I saw in DeFi. I was super excited by, but by what I saw in on-chain art. I just thought these were like incredible primitives that, I believed at the time, and still believe, although, maybe with a little more,
with a
you,
grain of
you know,
salt.
yeah, that will change the
But I
future, right?
remember at the time, like you were, I mean, you still are, but I think then you're even more so, like very active on Twitter. I mean,
Yeah,
even just like the fact that you like branded your account as like what a crypto tax guy, like you own that, and like you were very vocal within the space and produced a lot of content, around the taxation side of things, but also in the NFT sphere. Like I
yeah.
meant to ask you, like, what's with your X copy obsession? I mean, I
Um,
love the art. I
dude,
really
when I
do. But
when
is
I
it
get
just
into
restricted to Xcopy, or is there
when
like
I get
other
into
stuff?
something, when I get into something, I like that's it.
You,
I
does your
feel
wife
this
share the
need,
same affinity towards
passion, or
Xcopy art, or
no, no,
is
no.
it
She
every
she
time
just
like
rolls
get
her
that
eyes.
damn stuff out of here?
Yeah, yeah, she rolls her eyes. Yeah, because every time I get into something, I feel this drive to understand it better than anyone else. And I think
I
it's
love
not
that.
that, I mean, with tax and crypto, that's not that hard, right? At the time, no one was thinking about, oh, there are these like really interesting DeFi transactions. Like, how are they taxed, right? So I wrote a report on the taxation of DeFi, which I released shortly before moving to Freed Frank, and that was probably the launch of my
Your magnum opus
career.
into
Yeah,
the
my career as a self-proclaimed crypto tax attorney. Um, but yeah, with art, it started as a on-chain generative art obsession. I think that that on-chain art, but especially on-chain generative art, are really like two of the best use cases for digital assets that we've
I agree.
developed thus far. With like long form generative art, I just think it's super exciting that and art, this art form really couldn't exist pre-blockchain, right? And an artist writes a code, and then the transaction hash of each mint is the variable that causes the code to create a different output. And the artist can sit back and say, okay, I will permit, X number of outputs to be created, and that's the canon. That's the canonical, group of artworks that collectively encompass this collection, right? This work. And I think that's super exciting. But then, even just the idea of a token, representing the digital artwork on which the artist has put their imprimatur, right? The so-called signed work or whatever.
Hmm.
Is, I think, super exciting, because there's so many digital artists out there who previously were, not really able to sell their work. I mean, it's super awkward to sell digital art without some kind of tracking
Value
device.
system. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, because it's, of course, immediately replicable. So, if you're a digital artist, like pre-blockchain, like what do you sell? Whatever. Yeah, it's like you could sell like your master copy, like a USB drive. Like, I'm not really sure. Like, as soon as
yeah.
it makes its
I
way to the internet, it's free for all, and the buyer has no way of establishing that, like, the provenance, right, that they bought from the artist, whereas now they can. So And then Xcopy, I just think is awesome. Like, I mean,
How
so
how many pieces do you have to date?
of art generally,
No, X copy art.
oh,
And I,
it's
I
in
know
the
you're still
20s.
buying, like
Yeah, probably
regardless of
like,
the market conditions.
yeah, probably like 24 or 25. I mean,
Wow.
Xcopy is really expensive and was already
Yes.
really expensive before I got into collecting his work. So I had to trade up. I obviously had to put in a significant amount of my own money. So it's it's a difficult pursuit, but I still
Your heart is there.
uh, yeah, I think he's brilliant. He's now gone through several sort of phases in his evolution as an artist. You can see two different styles behind me actually. I think it's really exciting to keep abreast of what he's working on. I think his you know, persona is really interesting. Is
Is he undoxed?
No, he's yeah,
No. Yeah.
he's anonymous, which I think is
Does
really
that
interesting.
intrigue you more, or are
Yeah,
you like
I think.
really in like would you want to meet him?
Well, yeah, I mean, it would be
Yeah.
it would be a dream to know who he is,
Is
and
there a
meet him.
community around like X copies
There is
works? There is.
there
Are
is
you very
yeah.
vocal within the community?
I'm involved. I own a grifter. There's a private Twitter chat for
Ooh.
grifter holders. Um, it's like a lot of art collectors, not PFP kind of, like rocket
Yeah, yeah.
ship, whatever, right? Just like people who
It's
really
it's not
like
to the
art
moon
and
stuff. It's like people
yeah.
who are in it because like they believe in it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
And
really
then I'm
cool.
also a token holder of the Doomed DAO, which actually came together really in the depths of the digital art bear last year in 2023. X copy work was pretty much as cheap as it's probably ever
As ever.
been. Other than like when he first started putting out artwork and like couldn't even sell
Couldn't
out,
even.
right?
Yeah, I remember.
Which is just wild to think about. And the Doom DAO is a small group of collectors. It's by invite only, who
Wow,
co-own a number of X copies works and focuses primarily on his low edition works.
very
So.
cool.
Yeah. So it's funny because it's like I scrounge up all my money to buy X copy, and then with what little change I have left, I use it to buy a token so I can like co-own the same works that I also directly own. That's how
Wow,
rabid X copies
that's
fans
that's
are.
really
But
cool. But I think that's like the other huge benefit that NFTs have brought us. Like on one hand, it's just the ability to appreciate and access these digital artworks, and on the other hand, it's the ability to have communities come and sprout up around them and use tokenization to be able to influence the proliferation of these art pieces and just generally to share common interests and
Oh,
to
100%. And it gives rise, like tokenization gives rise to, entirely new ways of, connecting with, people with similar interests and with the artists themselves, right? One, like the community like knows who each other are, right? Which is like something that doesn't exist in the traditional art world. And I could speak from experience because I also have collected traditional art. Like literally, no one would give a
wow.
shit if someone came into my, home and stole like a canvas off my wall, right? The gallery would just say, well, we can sell you another one. Like the artist probably wouldn't care. Other collectors certainly wouldn't care, right? But early in my collecting days, I was fished out of a couple of art blocks pieces, and the
That's
community actually, yeah.
your rite of
Well, that was
passage
that
right there.
that that actually made tokenization click for me in a big way because the community came together and helped me retrieve a number of them.
Wow.
And some people even like, gifted me art, and it made me realize like no one here wants anyone else to have a bad time because that would reflect poorly on
I,
the artists and the art, right? And so when people talk about community, no, oftentimes it's kind of fake and like a bag pumping, but there is something real in there as well, right? And Xcopy really I think explores the idea, like in a pretty artistic and profound way by creating works that are then that are really intended to be burned for new works, right? He released an open edition Max Payne a couple of years ago, and now you can
isn't
burn
that your
your
shirt?
you could burn this is a grifter actually,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, but now you can burn your Max Payne for like another work, right? And often oftentimes he'll release even a small edition, and the people eligible to mint the edition, he sets kind of like an artificially low mint price, and the people eligible to mint are people who have held his other works
Existing
for
holders.
long periods of time. I think that's a really, really cool way
Yeah.
to build a collector base, to sort of expand your base through the release of, lower value works, but also like continue to reward your long-term collectors. It's just brilliant.
I agree. I think it's the most brilliant thing about NFTs. And
Yeah.
it's a shame we don't see more of that. I think we will over time. I mean, now that we get rid of a lot of the riffraff.
Yeah, we keep saying that, right?
No, 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 but it's true. I mean, the fact that NFTs are still a thing is, I mean, what are we expecting there to be another boom? It's exactly what we didn't want. So like the fact
Yeah,
that like there continue to exist these like micro communities that I don't know about, I don't know what's going on there, and the
yeah,
fact that new artists, to some degree, continue to release their art, their digital works. Um, within in the form of NFTs and to build communities is that's it. Like it doesn't need to be like a huge thing with tons of hype and FUD and FOMO. I think
yeah.
where it is
Agreed.
now is the future, and
Yeah, yeah,
that's not a
a
bad thing.
100%. Yeah, yeah. No, no, I agree. And there are some, there are a number of people working on, really exciting, um, you know, primitives projects that can help with this, right? I'm excited to see what 6529 is building with his his memes collection. I'm excited to I'm really obviously excited to see what Xcopy continues to do with building out his community, and I'm excited about display tech kind of starting to catch up.
You got to
The,
get a
the
screen that like makes sense for your.
yeah, actually, this one here rotates, but it's
Ah,
kind of a
okay.
pain in the ass to do. So
um,
yeah.
okay, I want to move away from digital art, which is a fascinating subject, and talk a little bit about tax. So at number one, like what percentage of your day to day is allocated to TradFi projects, and what is and how much of your time is spent on crypto related stuff? Just, I mean, it
Um,
doesn't have to be an exact
yeah,
science, but
really
just
hard, but
uh,
I often joke that crypto accounts for like 95% of my time and 5% of my revenue. Not really accurate anymore, but I do spend the majority of my time probably doing digital assets related stuff. Um,
okay. So like
but uh,
what kind of stuff are we talking about? Like, what's your main gig?
Yeah, so I'm a transactional tax attorney, which means that I, primarily um, help people think about the tax treatment of different products,
Mm-hmm.
and something that comes along with that is help people structure specific products, and um, you know and structure um, their own sort of organizational structure, right? So for example, I could give you a few examples to just illustrate. A large financial institution wants to create a a tokenized money market fund that is whose tokens are transferable on the Ethereum blockchain. Okay, that's all well and good, but what does that mean? Like where might the money market fund? It's obviously an off-chain product that is then tokenized. Where should the money market fund be organized? How do you ensure that the money market fund itself is not subject to U.S. tax, or minimizes U.S. tax if it is subject to U.S. tax? How do you ensure that the holders of the tokens are not subject to U.S. withholding tax, or if they're non-U.S. are not subject to to U.S. income tax? That might be one example of like product structuring, right? Or alternatively, another product structuring thing might be, a centralized exchange is considering creating a liquid, their own version of a liquid staking token. What is that from a U.S. tax perspective, right? Is it if holders move from ETH to this liquid staked ETH, is that a taxable event or not? Do they include their income currently? Like if the token is non-rebasing, like RETH, for example, or wrapped staked ETH, is there current income inclusion, notwithstanding that the token is non-rebasing, or is there not?
Mm-hmm.
What a little more boring, but obviously very, very relevant to centralized institutions is what tax reporting obligations might there be on the centralized exchange, and how can they comply with that reporting if or are they required to comply if people withdraw that token into self-custody? So those are like product structurings.
And presumably we're talking about, I mean, the U.S. side of things, and
Yeah,
I'm
U.S. federal
assuming
income
that
tax.
as like U.S. regulators have become more and more aggressive in their enforcement and more elusive in their setting out guidelines for U.S. companies. People have gone more and more offshore, and then their tax reporting obligations have become more on the personal side of things. Like
Um,
how has it impacted
yeah.
your
So the yeah
your workflow?
yeah so that actually dovetails nicely with I said kind of products and then like organizational structure, dovetails with organizational structure. So let's say you have a
Mm-hmm.
something else I do. You might have a protocol team. They're US. They developed a protocol and now they want to start to progressively decentralize it, right? So they might want to set up a foundation to be the protocol steward. Where should that foundation be organized? How might the protocol look? And, assuming that there is some kind of token-based governance, what would the tax consequences be to those token holders? How might value be driven to those or token holders or to users of the protocol? And there is a very large offshoring component.
Mm-hmm.
So um, there are a lot of substantive rules here, and I don't know how deep you want to delve into those, but I'll give you just sort of like a few basics. Number one, if you have a U.S. corporation, U.S. corporations pay U.S. corporate tax, right? So they pay, currently that's a 21% tax on net income, and net income uh, is, in determining net income, deductions often are subject to limitations, right? So it's a 21% on net income, and net income is not necessarily the same as like GAAP income.
Mm-hmm.
So, people's immediate response to that fact might be, oh, okay, so let's set up a corporation offshore, right? However, there are a couple of rules that offshore corporations need to be aware of. Number one is that if an offshore corporation, like let's say a Cayman Foundation, which is a popular form of entity in the crypto space, if a foreign corporation is engaged in a U.S. trade or business, which is a term of art in the U.S., but basically in a U.S. business,
Mm-hmm.
then that corporation is subject to U.S. corporate tax, even though it's not organized in the United States. And the tax that it's subject to is actually higher than 21%. It's 21% and then a 30% branch profits tax on top of
On
that.
top of
So,
that,
so
wow.
yeah. So,
But engage in U.S. business presumably means that you generate some degree of revenue within the United States.
yeah,
So
it means that
presumably,
there
just
are
blocking U.S.
people.
consumers would mean that you could prove to the tax authorities
No,
in the U.S. that
it
you
doesn't.
no, it's not
No,
significant.
no. What it comes down to typically is whether you have um, individuals within the United States acting on behalf of the foreign corporation on a regular and continuous basis in a profit-making enterprise. So even if you're serving exclusively non-U.S. people, if you're doing that
From
through
within the United
U.S.
States.
agents,
Okay.
then the IRS might assert corporate tax.
And if it was in the opposite, if I was let's say, I don't know, a British company and my entire team was in the UK and and the majority of my user base was in the United States, would that be considered a US business?
If you were in the no,
No.
typically
Okay, so it
not.
just goes by
Yeah, yeah,
who is where the profits are
yeah,
being
are made.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And then so that's like number one. So like let's
Okay.
say, you set up a Cayman Foundation to steward a protocol. There are obviously many ways, there are many ways to skin the cat, but typically the foundation wants to ensure that it is not in the US trade or business. And then number two, the number two rule that like foreign corporations need to be aware of is that US equity owners, and I'll get into what that means in a second. U.S. equity holders can be subject to, of foreign corporations, can be subject to really adverse, like effectively penalty taxes um, uh, on, on gain they recognize from selling their equity, unless they have elected, and in fact do, um, pay tax basically on a pass-through basis on their share of the foreign corporation's income. So, like, what does that mean? Well, with a foundation, you might say there's no equity holders because a foundation is a stockless entity. But U.S. tax law actually is like a substance over form exercise typically. And
Mhm.
if for example, if I, Jason, set up a Cayman Foundation where I get to elect the director, and the Cayman Foundation
Then
like
you would
holds a
argue
bunch.
that it's transparent basically, and it's a
Exactly,
U.S. business
exactly.
because you're the one who's pulling the
And
strings.
so I might be subject to significant adverse tax consequences,
Hmm.
um, uh, unless I include my share of that entity's income currently on my tax return, which itself is kind of, a tax penalty to a lot of people. So you have to think about that. And
Okay.
then a lot of the similar rules apply potentially with on-chain structures because let's say you have a DAO that's like an investment DAO. Let's say an art collecting DAO. We can bring it home. Um, it trade, has ETH that has appreciated. It disposes of that ETH in order to acquire artwork. Um, a disposition of ETH at a gain is a taxable event. Um, who is taxed on it? Sort of non-tax lawyers would say, no one's taxed on it. It's just this on-chain arrangement, right? But
But
the U.S. tax
somebody,
laws have a
somebody,
very
yeah.
broad definition of what an entity is, and might or I should say will, in some situations, treat so-called DAOs as entities for U.S. tax purposes. And then the fact that
And
you
then
didn't
what?
wrap
Every
it,
DAO member would be
well, we don't know. We don't know.
okay.
So
Okay, but
so
it
like
hasn't
in some
happened yet.
case, well, in some cases,
I mean,
so
because there has
so
been like cases of like shared liability among DAO
DAO,
members,
yeah,
right?
DAO is like the
So
albatross around all our necks.
S-
Uh,
so potentially something like that could happen where the foundation is slapped with like a big tax bill and then the DAO members need to foot the bill.
Well,
on a prorated
not
basis
the
based on their
you
token
might have a
holdings?
situation one where a foundation is subject to U.S. tax, and there's a legal entity. The IRS just goes after that foundation. You might have a situation where the
With
IRS asserts that a DAO is alternatively either a domestic corporation for U.S. tax, in which case it's subject to corporate tax, and then I don't know, maybe the IRS goes after each individual DAO member for that tax under like an Oogie DAO type theory of joint and several liability. Or the IRS might assert that the DAO is a foreign corporation for U.S. tax and is engaged in U.S. business. Same consequence, same result. Or it might assert that it's a partnership and also,
which
kind
would
of
also have
same
like shared
result.
liability, right?
Yeah, kind of the same result. Or you might have a DAO that is not an entity, right? I mean, I believe in, and I've sort of written a few thought threads on this. I'd like to write a longer paper. That it's possible to structure a DAO that is not treated as an entity from a U.S. tax perspective.
Well, that's kind
But
of my next question for you. You mentioned that the way to go is typically to use a foundation as a steward for the DAO. And then there's like kind of this period of gradual decentralization where you decide that you want to have a decentralized protocol, but nothing could just be like, go float into thin air and then be decentralized on day one. So you have the foundation with kind of just like stewards it towards decentralization. So you know, we've I think that one of the earliest models was the Ethereum Foundation, and we have quite a few years of traction at this point. Like, what is that sweet spot where the foundation ceases to be, a significant body in the decision making process, and you could really pinpoint a DAO and say you are truly a decentralized structure, and and in the case of the taxman, to say, okay, this is a tax obligation on the DAO and not the foundation.
yeah,
Because
I mean, I can give you I can give you
your
a
yeah
road
didn't
like
sound very.
no, I can give you a roadmap, like
I
a
know this is like
hypothetical
the
roadmap,
question,
right?
and there
It's
isn't really an
just,
answer. But
yeah, obviously, if there
since
were a
you're
one size fits all, no one would need to hire me, right?
right, but I'm
Um,
saying like there must be like
well, here, let's like talk through it. And I think this is something that most tax lawyers wouldn't do because it's risky, but
it's a slippery slope.
yeah,
And
but I'll do it. So let's
wait, do
pretend you've
do
got.
do with disclaimers then, just
Yeah, well, obviously.
because.
Look, I'm not anyone's
No,
lawyer.
obviously this
I'm
is
not. I'm speaking on in a
but
personal capacity, not for free prank.
first.
Okay, all the
No, but
regular
I'm saying
disclaimers.
even if you were talking to a client now, I would
Okay.
still put those disclaimers
Yeah.
there.
Oh, for
So
sure. So let's say you have a U.S. development team. Um,
okay,
they work. They
provide
work
services to
for.
a Cayman Foundation.
Well, we're not
Oh,
even
okay,
there
okay.
yet. Like they work for a U.S. development company. They might raise money from VCs and friends and family in exchange for equity, safes, which is essentially just stock from a U.S. tax perspective, and maybe token warrants, which are kind of like a that itself is like a little weird, but kind of like a promise that um, if
Project
the development
launches or
company ultimately, if the project launches and the development company ultimately has tokens in its hands, it'll, give those tokens to the investors.
the investors.
Then subsequently, the development company, builds out a product, and the goal is for the development company to become, like a like a SaaS company, right? It's going to provide services, right, relating to the software, but it doesn't want to run the software. Right? That's typically what decentralization means. You're giving you're basically open sourcing the software, and you're giving
and
someone
giving
else
the
the
keys
admin
to
keys.
somebody else
Yeah.
to drive.
So in that situation, maybe a Cayman Islands entity would be established with true decision makers outside of the United States who are acting on behalf of that Cayman Foundation. That Cayman Foundation, might be given the admin keys initially to upgrade the software. The Cayman Foundation turns around and hires the development company. Um, to continue working on the software. It has authority to hire other people, but at least initially would probably be leaning heavily on the development company. And it pays the development company an arm's length fee for the development company's services. So
Mm-hmm.
now you have a Cayman Foundation that is not, is in this hypothetical, not engaged in a U.S. trade or business because the decisions and activities are being done offshore. It's paying the U.S. development company an arm's length fee. The U.S. development company owes corporate tax on its income, like including that fee. Um, and the Cayman Foundation doesn't have equity holders. It has like a board of directors who are paid to be board, the directors, but also they're non-U.S. taxpayers, so they don't really have to worry about the penalty taxes that I mentioned earlier.
Right. So
Now the
nobody at this
foundation,
point can claim that there is a decentralized protocol of any kind.
there's no right. There's not a decentralized protocol, but
There's
it's
not
it's
even a
more
product yet. It
decentralized.
might be
It's
in the
more
making.
decentralized than it started, right? It's two companies rather than one.
Yeah. But again,
Okay.
even that, it doesn't represent decentralization. We still don't have a
No.
product. We don't
So
have a
so
blockchain. We
then
don't have a
so
product on a
then
blockchain.
well
Hmm.
well let's say maybe the Cayman Foundation puts the product on the blockchain, but it still controls the upgrade keys, right, for the product. Maybe
But
it long
presumably, all the know-how and the ability to deliver this product, whatever the product is still in the hands of the U.S. service provider. Even
yeah
if the community and the foundation and the members of the foundation wanted to go ahead and fire them and hire somebody else, they probably wouldn't have the ability at this point because the way things spun out to even build the proposed product. So
right
again,
right
we're not
right.
even close to decentralization yet.
The foundation then might launch the token, right, to devolve governance over the protocol to the community. And at that point, Cayman Foundation, typically through a BVI subsidiary, or other subsidiary for non-US tax reasons, other regulatory reasons, might issue the token to regular users of the protocol, keep a bunch for itself, so that it has, a runway with which to continue, spending money on R&D. Um, might It typically would pay a significant amount to the development company, as like basically as a retainer for its services, or as past payment for past services. The development company in turn uses those tokens to make good on its token warrants to the VCs, and friends and family investors. And now you have something that's starting to look more decentralized, right? At which point the Cayman Foundation might consider transferring the upgrade keys, or
Hmm.
some portion of governance over the protocol to the token holders, right? Now you have a group of people, who can change the protocol through a vote. The Cayman Foundation at that point becomes more of a grants organization, right? Its job is to
Incentivize people to build on the
incentivize
chain.
people to build, including the original development company, but not necessarily only the development company, right? Hopefully by this point there's more people sort of building on the chain or the product, or integrating the product into their
Hmm.
own products, et cetera. And you have what people might refer to as a DAO, but I prefer not to use that term if possible. Sort of making actual decisions about the protocol operations, but subject always to what is actually, what variables are actually built into the protocol, right? Like
Sure.
the DAO, all it can do is on-chain activities. If you want a DAO that can do more than just voting, like up down on running self-executing scripts, frankly, you probably have an entity from a U.S. tax perspective. Like, in other words, if the DAO holds its own treasury,
Why would
that
that be the clinch?
why? Because a partnership from a U.S. tax perspective,
Mm.
um, is uh, any group of people collectively engaged in a profit-making enterprise, and dividing the profits from that enterprise. So I think that if you have people who who collectively own a diversified treasury, like a treasury that's not just the governance token, but
Hmm.
includes maybe stables or ETH or whatever. Um, it's hard to say that they're not, when they're co-owners of property, it's hard to say that they're not
That they
that
don't
they're not
resemble
joint
a.
venturers of some
Yeah.
sort, right? So I think that there are other ways. Actually, I'll give a shout out to Gabe Shapiro, our a mutual friend of ours, who and the Meta Lex team, which is working on what they call Borgs, but essentially are these DAO adjacent entities. And I think they've helped articulate, you know, what I think a lot of lawyers have been saying for a long time, which is that anything businessy, like, for lack of a better term, making grants, anything that might require a contract, um, really ought to be like ultimately ought to be housed in corporate solution. And the DAO, you should take measures to ensure that the DAO is not an equity holder in that corporation. Like the DAO really ought to be like an on-chain voting mechanism. Um, you know, I think like the DAO can vote on, on running some script that changes the protocol, that like turns on a fee switch, that, whatever. Maybe the DAO can be empowered to mint more governance tokens and grant them, again, it's this undiversified treasury, grant them to, one of these boards, like a corporation that is set up specifically, to make grants to developers to build, new products that incorporate, this protocol. But the DAO itself should really should not be legally empowered to do any of that. Once it is, like if the DAO starts acting like a business entity, I think both the IRS and other regulatory bodies will view it as a business entity and treat it as such. And if it's not wrapped, that just means that each individual, actor potentially has personal liability for that entity's actions. It's
Have
just
board.
tough pills to swallow, but
Yeah, no, I know.
yeah, it is what it is. I mean, you have,
Yeah, and there's
there's
like
an
this like
alternative.
fine line that you walk, and like it's
Yeah.
very hard to know which side you're on or which side you even want to be on. I
And lawyers can't
often,
even agree. Lawyers can't even agree on like where the line is.
I mean, I think it really depends on the client. I
It
have like
depends on the
it.
client, and frankly, like there's an alternative that like people shouldn't be afraid to mention. It's not something that we can advise someone to do as lawyers, but like you just do what you want and keep your head down and hope for the best,
Uh,
right?
I mean, that's for
A-
sure.
And I mean, a lot of
And
people
stay
in the
the fuck out of the
space.
U.S.
Yeah,
That's
and a
that's
lot of this people in the space do just that, and many have been burned and many have not, and
for sure.
that's
I always tell
that.
people that there's like
Yeah,
a scale of risk. Like there's nothing is risk free. It's a question of like where you feel comfortable on that scale.
yeah,
But too many times, like the thought process of clients, or often in these cases potential clients, they come wanting to have a DAO structure because they're like, okay, I have a product that is that typically requires a license, but I don't want to obtain a license because either I can't because no regulator will give it to me, or because it's too expensive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch one of these decentralized thingies, and then it's not me, it's not anybody, it's an entity in the air, and so nobody will be able to come after me afterwards.
yeah,
And then even if you go with them to that next step in the process where you explain to them, okay, well, if it really is a DAO, if it really is decentralized, if it really is autonomous, then it's also not yours. It's
right.
you have to give those keys over to the community, and there's a chance that they're going to turn around and say like, to hell with you, buddy. And so like it that's why I say it
But
depends on the
all yeah,
client, because
right. But also like um, building an illegal organization and then transferring power to a group of anonymous people in order to avoid regulatory crackdown. essentially the facts of the DAO case. And,
Uh, Too many times,
no,
I've joined
it's
like a
worth noting
Discord
that.
group, and somebody said like, "Oh, welcome to the DAO." And I'm like, "Dude, wait, I'm not ready for that kind of commitment yet." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, at the same
Because
time, like maybe that's okay for a lot of people. I mean, I don't keep abreast
I
of
highly
Oogie, but
doubt.
I imagine the Oogie DAO exists in some form or another, right? Like there are still people who own the governance tokens, and are okay with living,
If you're aware, then that's
as a
one thing.
nonce.
But
But
I
yeah,
doubt that most people who are participating in these types of protocols are truly aware of the regulatory risks.
yeah, yeah, and I mean also just like. Um, Well, yes, and I'll also say like uh, if if you want to just play the sort of audit lottery, then don't hire a large law firm. Like you don't, like
No, but you're part
they're
of
different.
the as far as they see it, like they I have clients who start off, they're like, listen, I don't care what you have to do, what you're going to charge me. I want to go to sleep at night and I don't have any worries. So they're looking at it from that perspective. But then they tell you what their plans are for their business. I'm not going to obtain a license. I want to be operational everywhere. And I'm not going to block any users, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do that. But I want to go to sleep at night, and I want to be worry free. But that's on
Yeah,
you. You just send me the bill, and that's where again, that's why I say it depends on the client because
yeah. But I
uh,
would also, I'd also say that that to me sounds like a red flag in the same way that like if you're a plastic surgeon and someone comes to you and says I want to I want to look like a supermodel, you probably send them away, right? I mean, if you want to go to bed without a worry in your head, don't get into crypto. I mean,
oh, that's
it's
that, I always say that.
yeah.
Uh,
At best, you're going to be operating at,
yeah,
like a
at a
mild
mild
level of
risk, right?
comfort. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's what lawyers are there for. Good, good lawyers. And if you just want to say, YOLO, like do it. Just don't, probably it's not worth
That's
paying
a
me my
play,
hourly rate to do, just to have me tell you
unless it
that,
makes you
like,
feel better, and
yeah,
some people it does.
sure.
Um, um, the Borgs, is that really a thing, or because I haven't seen it excel past like that position paper that they
Yeah,
circulated
yeah,
last
yeah.
year? Is it like
I
becoming
think
like an actual?
I think Borgs have existed, for probably most of the existence of DeFi, of on-chain
How so?
voting. Um, uh, well, like you could consider, for example, um, you could consider some of what Maker seems to have done to be to involve the use of Borgs. You could think of like Curve. Curve has, I think, a Curve is almost entirely on chain, but does have
I
one
read your
like
paper
one
on
security
Curve.
council, right? I don't know that the security council itself is wrapped in an entity, but you could think of the Security Council as kind of like a proto Borg. Like they only have the ability to kill pools in Curve, right? If they determine that there's been some kind of compromise of a pool, like a hack or a governance attack or something, the Security Council in Curve has
It's
the
a like
ability to
a
kill the pool.
limited kill switch
Yeah, and that's a perfect that's a
example.
perfect example
Yeah,
of what a Borg you might use a Borg for. Now imagine if the Security Council, all of those signers were also, by virtue of being signers, named directors in a Cayman Foundation and were acting in their capacity as directors. Now they also have, limited liability for their actions for the Borg. They're not owned by the DAO. You might give
right.
the DAO the ability, you might consider what you can do, like give the DAO the ability to, appoint new directors if one resigns or something. You'd obviously have to consider whether that gives the DAO kind of too much control. But there are ways to create these DAO adjacent entities that where I sort of, my visual model is like the DAO is this hub in the center, and it has all of these spokes, right? But it doesn't control what the individual spokes do, but it might have strings attached to what they can do, right?
Right.
And each spoke is a Borg. And that differs from the traditional model of your multinational firms where instead of a hub in the center, you have you have management up top, right? You have like the mothership of a multinational, and then you have like many layers of subsidiaries, and the subsidiaries might actually act fairly independently of the mothership, subject only to broad parameters kind of sent down from the mothership. But here, like you've eliminated that,
You're really
you
sticking
know,
to the Borg analysis here.
yeah, you've eliminated it. Well, because I do think that that's sort of the way. I mean, that's the way to do it if you, or not the way, but it's a way to do it if you want to, if you want to minimize your regulatory and tax risk.
But
And if
again,
you actually want to decentralize your product, right? Like then you have a DAO that that can control the protocol, but is not acting as a business entity because the business activities are housed in these different these different corporate entities that the DAO does not own. You know?
it keeps it pure to that in that sense.
Yeah, yeah.
But
It
again,
might be
not
inconsistent
financial
with
advice, not legal advice.
It
Do
might be
your own
inconsistent
research.
with what's it might be inconsistent with what the founders actually want or what some of the investors actually want. Because as you said, like oftentimes they want to run a centralized business,
With
but
zero liability
with zero life.
and be able to point at somebody
Exactly.
else and say, "My lawyer told me." No, it was that guy who bought the
Yeah,
NFT.
yeah, yeah. Crypto isn't good for that. I mean, you can try, but like
But
it's
that's
not that
part of
great.
the
It's not that
part
good
of
for it,
the
honestly.
maturation process.
Yeah,
I think that the industry
yeah.
needs to go through as people
And
understand.
for what it's worth, I'm not some like you know like I'm not like a law maxi. Like, I'm just like delivering the news, right? I do think that the law needs to change as well. I think it's kind of insane that like you I don't know, you form like a collector club with some some of your internet friends who are located all over the world, and you might you probably are in a deemed partnership for U.S. tax purposes, and the partnership is liable for failing to send K-1s to everyone. That just doesn't make any sense from a U.S. tax perspective. That needs to change, but it's not going to change anytime soon. Um, it also probably is a lot lower risk, when you have these like sort of small, like friendly collectors clubs, that's kind of lower risk than like a massive DeFi protocol. So like maybe people are more okay. Look, I'm certainly okay belonging to an art collectors club that is, might be a partnership, but is not doing K1s because it's whatever. We're not making any money here. But if I were like structuring
Hence
a
the
DeFi protocol,
501(c)(3) side hustle.
yeah, right, exactly. You could set up like but if I were structuring a DeFi protocol that I wanted to live for like for 10, 20 years, or to make billions of dollars for governance holders or something, I'd worry. I'd want to spend the big bucks on like good lawyers to make sure that I'm on the up and up. That's just me.
So if you also want to make the big bucks launching a decentralized exchange, and you want to make sure to lawyer up, where can people find you, Jason?
Oh,
Your
so I'm fairly easy to find. You could Google Jason Schwartz, Fried Frank. Fried is spelled like fried, so it sounds like I work at a hot dog company. Um, you can find me on Twitter, crypto tax guy ETH. I post a lot less about tax these days. I'll still post tax
Please
stuff, but
post more.
honestly, it,
It
in a
got
sense,
boring.
it can be a liability. Like I don't want to piss people off. I have to always be concerned about even though I would never like dream of actually sharing privileged information. It's a small world, right? So like once I I'm working with like a couple of projects that are thinking about something. I feel awkward, sharing it because it wouldn't be too difficult to guess who, like who I might be talking about. Um, I've had I've
The same
also
way
had
that there's no crypto without risk. There's no Twitter without pissing people off.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you should
yeah.
realize that at this point.
I've also had like government officials like express some uh
Dissatisfaction.
yeah, dissatisfaction with like particularly with the crypto broker reporting regs. You might remember we're still kind of fighting this battle.
Yeah, you
But
had like two long threads on that.
yeah, and the crypto broker reporting regs initially when proposed were um, really, really overbroad, really, really scary. The Treasury ultimately finalized the regs without the part that applies to decentralized finance, basically,
Hmm.
and kind of reserved on that. So that's why I say we're still fighting it. We still don't really know where it'll go. But but preceding their doing that, and I think one of the like an impetus for them not including this, the DeFi aspect, was a real push by the industry that I was pretty proud of our industry for, to write letters into Treasury, including with the use of AI, ChatGPT bots. LexPunk Army did a thing that encouraged people to use AI to help them write letters to Treasury explaining what a disaster this proposal was. Coinbase did something as well, and I on my Twitter profile supported this, and some government officials expressed concern that that kind of opens a Pandora's box, where anytime
That your support opened the Pandora's box,
that the
or the
use
whole
of
movement.
AI, yeah, that the use of AI to empower individuals to write into government to express their displeasure with the proposed regulations proposed by undemocratically elected bureaucrats was somehow problematic. You can see that I'm not
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, they're right that it opens a Pandora's box. Like the
But it's
look,
open. It's open
yeah.
in so many levels. Like it's not gonna. We can't close it at this point. Whether you publicize it on Twitter or whether people access it on their own accord, like anybody could set up something like that on their own, and they should be able to. Like, I
I
mean, I think
mean,
that that's the
here's the
greatest
thing:
example of like free speech.
we have a we have a Congress that cannot possibly be expertised in everything they need to be expertised in. So what they've done is uh, they've foisted a lot of the responsibility of rulemaking to agencies that are supposed to be technocrats that have become experts in various things, right? We can have arguments over whether they've vested too much authority in those agencies. But one way to sort of like re-democratize, right, or um, bring back the people's voice in this process is the Administrative Procedure Act, which requires agencies to propose rules before finalizing them and give the public and a reasonable time during which to comment on the proposed rules. Historically, uh, those comments have come from large law firms acting on behalf of vested interests, from bar associations, from think tanks, from like CPA associations, etc. And the government was able to digest the dozen or so comments they receive. And now, because we have ChatGPT and other LLMs, um, we can empower like the entire U.S. populace to comment on proposals, right? To understand proposals, right? Because you can actually feed the like long regulatory packages into an LLM and get back a summary right away,
Yeah, sure.
and to write a letter to the government when people might not have felt comfortable writing a letter, themselves, like,
But that's nothing
right?
new. I mean, we've
I
been as
I
far as long
think
as I can remember, people have been incentivized to write letters to their congressmen and local representatives
But
to
now you can do it
support
at
or go
scale,
again.
right? Yeah,
Okay,
and I think it's great. I think it's a
and they
great
could
thing.
respond at scale.
I'm like I along with I think a lot of the like crypto natives you'd say I'm really scared about agency overreach in our space and elsewhere. And so I think it's a great thing to let the people give the people their voice back, because you have these unelected bureaucrats making rules that really affect our day-to-day lives. Um,
But what you're
but
saying is the fact that government pushed back on your support on Twitter for something that you actually
well,
support has
here's what
effectively managed to shut your voice down.
I'm
So,
saying
like, they're
that
actually silencing free
yeah,
speech,
yeah,
and they succeeded. That's
well,
terrifying in my
I
mind.
just have to be a little bit more
Politically correct.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I no,
So
look,
American.
I don't. We they're right that this opens a Pandora's box in the following way. Um, if any regulatory proposal is met with 100,000 or more comments, um, then uh, then it becomes either like a fight of AIs, right? Because like the government will have to build its own AI to sift through those comments. Because by law, like under the Administrative Procedure Act, it actually has to consider consider and respond to each unique substantive comment raised,
Hmm.
or I guess agencies will just stop proposing rules, right? They'll just regulate through enforcement, as we've seen some agencies do recently, and that's not really good
That's not the way
for
to go either.
anyone.
No.
So I don't know what the solution is. I do think that you know look, I don't know what the solution is. I do think that people should have a voice. I think that probably the administrative state has gotten too big. I think that this particular proposal was dangerous enough to crypto and to technology generally, that it deserved
Warranted
the
something like that.
attention we
Yeah,
gave it.
for sure.
But I also see, I also understand
You
why
see that, you understand the
some people are
danger.
concerned about it. Yeah. Everything is nuanced, right? Nothing is.
I'm scared we're gonna get too political at this point. So maybe we should, in the interest of being American and PC, I think we'll call it a day.
We could get as political as you want. I hate everyone.
Oh,
So
okay. So
that's
then we're of the same breed. Yeah, yeah. It's America's really scaring me. Like, I feel like whatever the outcome of the elections are going to be is going to be terrifying. I'm talking about, I vote in the United States. I try never to vote as like an Israeli, or even like as a Jew. I try always to vote with like my American hat on. Like, I don't think it's right to, to vote from abroad if you're not like looking what's best for America. I
yeah.
think I'm very, very scared. I don't know. Just like I get all my information from Twitter, which may or may not be a good thing, but like it just seems like the whole country is falling apart.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
Is that me just like freaking out and
no, no, no,
Twitter
no.
like showing me?
I think it's scary times. I don't. Um, a few weeks ago, I had to decide to just sort of just like uh, distance myself from all of it, just like mentally, because it's too frustrating. It's kind of too scary. So I'm just trying to focus on my kid and my wife and my work.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's I mean I like look, like in 2016, I thought like I couldn't imagine um, wanting Trump to win the election, and now I can't really imagine wanting Kamala to win. I think they're both awful, but it's like,
Right, but isn't it
yeah,
sad that this is the best that America has to offer on like both sides?
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
I'm
and
saying like after like a
we've gotten like
horrendous,
pulled to the extremes somehow, and I don't think anyone is really. I mean, maybe some people, but I think like a lot of people are are unhappy that we're there and are just like trying to vote for the lesser of what they view as the lesser of the
the
two
lesser of the two
evils.
evils.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. But yeah, I mean to have a candidate who who like thinks Twitter you know
Should be
needs
banned,
to yeah
and
needs to be
uh,
censored. Um,
or that anything
is
should be censored. Like, I mean, like, it's
And we
I
have
don't know.
like, we have like friends of friends who are in prison now, right? Like it's really
Really,
crazy.
really,
Well,
what for?
right?
Like
I mean,
free
no,
speech related stuff?
like uh, like Roman Storm, like you know
Yeah,
people who are
sure.
friends with, yeah.
Wow, wow,
It's
wow,
it's
wow.
kind of it's yeah, it's kind of scary. I've used Tornado Cash before, like it's crazy to think like, oh, uh, I can't I can't do things to protect my own privacy or else I'm a
Yeah,
criminal. Things that
it's
I
it.
thought were just like normal kind of operational security.
It's interesting. I just finished reading Jeff White's book, Rinsed.
Mhm.
You familiar with it?
Yeah, yeah, I haven't read it, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think one of the last chapters he talks about Tornado Cash.
Uh-huh.
And like up until he says that it's Tornado Cash, you think he's talking about like some really evil software. And then, I mean, anything could be taken out of context or put into a context to make it seem like,
Yeah,
something like Telegram, for example. Like, I love Telegram and I use it frequently, but like, is it true that some people may have taken Telegram and used it for whatever, I don't know, drug trade or sex trafficking, which is a
yeah, of
terrible thing?
course.
And but like, people use buses and ships and airplanes for the same stuff. Like, are we going to shut
Yeah,
down all the
no,
airports now? Like, they're it seems that the lines have like really blurred on so many issues. That's what's really scary.
yeah, 100%. It's yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it goes. And I like to think that, in the end, like, the kind of cypherpunk tech wins out, but I don't know. It's hard. Like when I talk to, you know, my normal friends and family, they're not particularly concerned.
Really,
Yeah,
I
or like some people are kind of
what, like
in
an
the
ignorance is
abstract.
bliss kind of thing, or
Yeah,
like
or like they're concerned in the abstract, but they don't like fully appreciate that it's like here and now.
wow,
Yeah,
it's gonna be a wild month.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll say.
All right.
Um,
Um,
all right, cool. Well, that was fun.
Thank you, Jason. This was
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Should do it again sometime. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.